The person you keep protecting may be the very person destroying your mind. In Buddhism, peace is not something you beg others to give you. Peace is something you stop sacrificing for people who do not respect your heart. You may call it love, you may call it loyalty, you may call it patience, but look closely. If holding on to someone makes you anxious, bitter, exhausted, and afraid of your own thoughts, then you are no longer loving them, you are losing yourself. The Buddha never taught us to cling to pain and call it compassion. He taught us to see clearly, and sometimes seeing clearly means accepting one painful truth. Not everyone who enters your life deserves to remain close to your mind. Let them go before their chaos becomes your nature. Let them go before their cruelty becomes your inner voice. Let them go before you forget what peace feels like. 1. Attachment becomes suffering when it destroys your peace. In Buddhism, attachment is not the same as love. This is one of the most misunderstood teachings on the spiritual path. Many people spend years believing that the more they hold on, the more deeply they love. They believe that refusing to let go is a sign of loyalty, commitment, or compassion. But the Buddha invited us to look much deeper than appearances. Attachment is the mind clinging to what it fears losing. It is the constant need for someone to behave a certain way so that you can feel secure. It is the fear that if they leave, change, reject you, or stop giving you attention, your happiness will disappear with them. Love, however, is very different. Love is spacious. It does not imprison. It does not constantly demand reassurance. It does not require you to sacrifice your peace every day just to keep another person close. Real love allows both people to grow. It encourages wisdom instead of fear. It brings calm instead of confusion. Attachment does the opposite. Attachment tightens around the heart like a clenched fist. It fills the mind with endless questions. Why did they not reply? Why did they speak to me like that? What if they leave? What if they no longer care? What if I lose them? These thoughts begin to repeat over and over until they become louder than your own inner wisdom. The tragedy is that many people mistake this constant anxiety for love. They believe that because they cannot stop thinking about someone, it must mean they truly love them. But endless thinking is not love. Endless worrying is not love. Constant fear is not love. It is attachment. The Buddha taught that craving and attachment are among the deepest roots of suffering. Whenever the mind clings to something as though it cannot live without it, suffering has already begun. The object of attachment may be a person, a relationship, an identity, or even an expectation. Whatever the mind refuses to release eventually gains the power to disturb that mind. This is why you must ask yourself an honest question. When you think about this person, what happens inside you? Does your breathing become softer? Or does your chest become tight? Do you feel inspired to become kinder, calmer, and wiser? Or do you feel anxious, jealous, insecure, and emotionally exhausted? Does this relationship encourage mindfulness? Or does it constantly pull you into emotional chaos? These questions matter because your inner state tells the truth far more clearly than your words ever can. Many people continue saying, "I love them," while every day their body is carrying stress, their mind is carrying fear, and their heart is carrying disappointment. That is not the peace the Buddha spoke about. The Buddha never taught that we should hold on to people at any cost. He taught us to observe the causes of suffering with complete honesty. If something repeatedly creates greed, fear, anger, resentment, or confusion within the mind, then we must be willing to examine our relationship with it. This examination is not about blaming another person. It is about awakening. It is very easy to spend years pointing at someone else and saying, "They make me suffer." But Buddhism asks a different question. Why does the mind continue clinging to what repeatedly creates suffering? That question is much more difficult because it requires us to look inward instead of outward. Perhaps you are holding on because you fear being alone. Perhaps you believe no one else will ever love you. Perhaps you have invested so many years into the relationship that walking away feels like admitting failure. Perhaps you are hoping that one more conversation, one more apology, or one more chance will finally change everything. These hopes feel comforting, but hope alone cannot transform reality. The Buddha encouraged us to see things exactly as they are, not as we wish they were. Reality may be telling you something that attachment refuses to hear. Some people are not in your life to bring lasting peace. Some people are not ready to change. Some people understand your pain perfectly well, but still continue the same harmful patterns because they have not awakened to their own suffering. You cannot meditate someone else into wisdom. You cannot love someone into becoming emotionally healthy if they refuse to do the work themselves. You cannot sacrifice enough of yourself to heal another person's ignorance. The more you try, the more exhausted you become. Slowly, you stop recognizing yourself. Your laughter becomes less frequent. Your sleep becomes lighter. Your thoughts become heavier. Even when they are not physically present, they continue occupying your mind. You replay conversations. You imagine different endings. You prepare arguments that never happen. You hope tomorrow will somehow be different from yesterday. This is the prison attachment creates. The body may be free, but the mind remains chained. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that freedom begins inside the mind. A person who cannot release unhealthy attachment is not truly free, no matter how comfortable their external life appears. Many people believe they are protecting love by holding on. In reality, they are protecting fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty, fear of beginning again. But every spiritual journey eventually reaches a moment where fear must no longer be the guide. Wisdom must become the guide instead. Wisdom quietly asks, what is this relationship doing to my heart? Not what it used to be, not what it might become, not what I wish it were. What is it doing to me today? If every day your peace becomes smaller, your anxiety becomes larger, your confidence disappears, and your joy fades away, then your attachment is asking you to pay a price that is far too high. Nothing outside you is worth losing your inner peace. This does not mean you stop loving people. It means you stop loving them in a way that destroys yourself. You can care deeply without becoming emotionally imprisoned. You can wish someone happiness without making them responsible for your own. You can appreciate someone without depending on them for your inner stability. This is the kind of love Buddhism encourages, a love rooted in freedom rather than fear, a love guided by wisdom rather than craving, a love that does not require constant suffering to prove its sincerity. Peace is never found by controlling another person. You cannot force someone to understand your heart. You cannot force them to respect your kindness. You cannot force them to value your presence. The harder you try to control another human being, the more restless your own mind becomes. Real peace begins when you stop trying to change those who refuse to change. It begins when you stop chasing what keeps running away. It begins when you stop holding tightly to what continues hurting you. Most importantly, it begins when you understand that protecting your own mind is not selfish. It is part of walking the path the Buddha revealed, because a peaceful mind is not something you find after the world finally treats you perfectly. A peaceful mind is something you protect by choosing, again and again, not to cling to the very things that keep destroying it. 2. Compassion does not mean allowing harm. One of the greatest misunderstandings about Buddhism is the belief that being compassionate means accepting everything people do to you without resistance. Many people believe that if they truly follow the Buddha's teachings, they must never walk away from anyone, never say no, never protect themselves, and never create distance from those who repeatedly hurt them. This misunderstanding has caused countless people to suffer silently for years. They remain in relationships that drain their energy because they think leaving would be selfish. They tolerate disrespect because they mistake silence for wisdom. They continue forgiving the same behavior while the wounds grow deeper, believing that endless tolerance is a sign of spiritual maturity. But the Buddha never taught us to become doormats for other people's ignorance. He taught compassion, but he also taught wisdom. These two qualities must always walk together. Compassion without wisdom becomes self-destruction. Wisdom without compassion becomes coldness. The middle way is learning how to hold both at the same time. Many people hear the teaching of loving kindness and believe it means allowing everyone unlimited access to their life. That is not what loving kindness means. Loving kindness is a quality of the heart. It is the sincere wish that all beings become free from suffering. But wishing someone freedom from suffering does not mean allowing them to continue creating suffering in your own life. There is a very important difference. Imagine someone carrying a burning torch. They have not learned how to hold it carefully, so everywhere they walk, they accidentally burn the people around them. Would compassion mean standing close enough to be burned over and over again? Or would compassion mean stepping back while still hoping that one day they learn how to carry the fire wisely? The second choice is much closer to the Buddha's teaching. You do not hate the person. You simply stop standing where the flames can continue reaching you. Many people confuse distance with hatred, but distance is not hatred. Distance can be an act of wisdom. Sometimes creating space is the most peaceful action you can take. When someone constantly lies, manipulates, insults, controls, criticizes, or emotionally exhausts you, remaining available to them every day does not help either of you. It does not encourage their growth. It only teaches them that your kindness has no boundaries. Without realizing it, you become part of a pattern that continues feeding suffering instead of ending it. The Buddha encouraged his followers to become deeply aware of cause and effect. Every action creates consequences. When harmful behavior is never met with healthy boundaries, that behavior often continues. Not because people are always evil, but because human beings naturally repeat what is allowed. This is why wisdom sometimes says something compassion alone cannot. Wisdom says, enough, not because you wish someone harm, but because you finally understand that allowing continuous harm helps no one. Many people stay because they feel guilty. They tell themselves, maybe they had a difficult childhood, they have been through trauma, they are stressed. They do not really mean it. They will change. It is true that many people carry deep pain. Buddhism teaches us that every person experiences suffering. Every person has ignorance. Every person carries habits formed by countless experiences. Knowing this can help us become less judgmental. But understanding someone's suffering does not require you to become the place where that suffering is endlessly expressed. You can recognize their pain without becoming trapped inside it. You can understand why someone behaves the way they do without accepting behavior that destroys your own peace. Compassion says, I understand that you are suffering. Wisdom adds, but I cannot allow your suffering to become my own. This balance is one of the most difficult lessons on the Buddhist path. Many people believe they can heal another person simply by loving them harder. They think if they become more patient, more forgiving, more available, eventually the other person will wake up. Sometimes that happens, but very often it does not. Real transformation cannot be forced from the outside. The Buddha himself could point toward liberation, but he could not force anyone to walk the path. Every person must awaken through their own understanding. You cannot meditate for someone else. You cannot become mindful on someone else's behalf. You cannot carry another person's karma. You cannot live another person's awakening. Each person must choose it for themselves. This realization is both painful and liberating. Painful because you recognize your limits. Liberating because you stop carrying responsibilities that never truly belong to you. Many compassionate people slowly lose themselves because they believe everyone else's happiness depends on them. They become the listener for every complaint, the rescuer for every crisis, the forgiver after every betrayal, the one who always understands while no one tries to understand them. Little by little, they become emotionally exhausted. Their own needs disappear. Their own peace becomes an afterthought. Eventually, they begin wondering why meditation no longer feels peaceful, why their mind feels constantly restless, why they feel empty even after helping everyone around them. The answer is often simple. They have given away so much of themselves that nothing remains for their own spiritual practice. The Buddha often spoke about caring for the mind. Your own mind is the place where wisdom grows. If it is constantly overwhelmed by other people's chaos, how can mindfulness deepen? How can compassion remain genuine instead of becoming resentment? This is why healthy boundaries are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of mindfulness. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not revenge. It is not an attempt to control another person. A boundary simply says, I recognize where your responsibility ends and where mine begins. It says, I cannot stop you from making harmful choices, but I can choose not to stand in their path. It says, I sincerely hope you find peace, but I will no longer sacrifice mine to keep you comfortable. There is great freedom in reaching this understanding. You no longer feel the need to argue endlessly. You no longer spend hours trying to convince someone to respect you. You no longer chase explanations from people who have already shown you, through their actions, how little they value your peace. Instead, you quietly return your attention to your own practice, to your own breath, to your own awareness, to your own heart. Because this is where true compassion begins, not by rescuing everyone, but by ensuring that your own heart does not become consumed by the suffering you are trying to heal. The Buddha's compassion was never weak. It was incredibly powerful because it was guided by wisdom. He loved all beings, yet he remained free. He cared deeply, yet he was never attached. He wished happiness for everyone, yet he never abandoned truth simply to avoid discomfort. This is the compassion we are invited to cultivate, a compassion that is gentle without becoming naive, a compassion that forgives without forgetting wisdom, a compassion that loves without becoming imprisoned. Sometimes the most compassionate choice is not to stay. Sometimes it is to quietly step away, carrying no hatred, no desire for revenge, and no bitterness in your heart. You leave not because you stopped caring. You leave because you finally understand that true compassion includes yourself as well. And when you protect your own peace with wisdom and kindness, you are not betraying the Buddha's teachings. You are living them. 3. Stop hoping they will become who you imagined. One of the deepest causes of suffering is not simply attachment to a person. It is attachment to an illusion. Many people are not holding on to the person standing in front of them today. They are holding on to a version of that person that exists only in their own mind. They remember how kind the person seemed at the beginning. They remember the beautiful promises that were made. They remember the moments that gave them hope. They remember the future they imagined together. Slowly, those memories become stronger than reality itself. Instead of seeing who the person has become, they continue seeing who they wish they would become. This is one of the greatest tricks of attachment. It convinces the mind that tomorrow will finally be different. It whispers, just wait a little longer. They will understand soon. They did not really mean it. They are just going through a difficult time. They will eventually appreciate everything you have done. These thoughts can continue for months. Sometimes they continue for years. And while you are waiting for tomorrow to become different, today continues hurting you. The Buddha encouraged his followers to observe reality exactly as it is, not as the mind wants it to be, not as fear imagines it, not as desire hopes it will become. Reality is always found in this present moment. If someone consistently shows disrespect today, then today's reality matters. If someone repeatedly lies today, then today's actions matter. If someone continually destroys your peace today, then today's truth deserves your attention. The mind, however, does something very different. It constantly negotiates with reality. It says, yes, they hurt me yesterday, but maybe tomorrow they will change. Yes, they disappointed me again, but perhaps next month everything will improve. Yes, this relationship makes me anxious, but I cannot give up now, because I have already invested so much. Without realizing it, your hope becomes stronger than your awareness. And when hope is separated from wisdom, it often becomes another form of attachment. There is nothing wrong with believing that people can change. In fact, Buddhism teaches that change is the nature of all things. Everything is constantly changing. Every thought changes. Every emotion changes. Every season changes. Every human being has the capacity to awaken, but there is an important truth that many people forget. Change must come from within. It cannot be forced by another person's love. No amount of sacrifice can awaken someone who refuses to become aware. No amount of patience can replace another person's willingness to transform. No amount of tears can create wisdom inside someone who continues choosing ignorance. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because many compassionate people secretly believe they can save someone through love alone. They believe that if they become more understanding, more forgiving, more patient, eventually the other person will recognize their value and become different. Sometimes this happens, but often it does not. Not because love is powerless, but because awakening is always a personal choice. Even during the Buddha's lifetime, not everyone who listened to his teachings became enlightened. Some people heard the truth and embraced it. Others heard the same truth and walked away unchanged. The Buddha could point toward the path. He could not walk it for them. The same is true in your own life. You can encourage someone. You can inspire someone. You can support someone, but you cannot awaken someone who has chosen to remain asleep. Understanding this does not make your heart cold. It makes your mind clear. There is another illusion that keeps people trapped. It is the illusion of potential. Potential is one of the most dangerous things to become attached to. You begin loving who someone could become instead of who they actually are. You build your entire future around possibilities rather than reality. You tell yourself, they have so much potential. They could become such a wonderful person. They just need more time. They just need someone to believe in them. While all of that may be true, potential is not the same as transformation. Potential is only a possibility. Reality is what exists now. The Buddha always brought attention back to the present moment, because the present moment is where truth lives, not in imagined futures, not in idealized memories, not in endless possibilities. Only here, only now. Look carefully at the person as they are today, not through the eyes of hope, not through the eyes of fear, not through the eyes of loneliness, but through the eyes of mindfulness. What do their actions teach you? Do they bring honesty or excuses? Do they bring peace or emotional confusion? Do they bring kindness or repeated disappointment? Actions reveal what words often try to hide. Many people become trapped because they continue listening to promises while ignoring patterns. Promises can be spoken in a single moment. Patterns are built through repeated actions. The Buddha encouraged careful observation because observation cuts through illusion. When you stop arguing with reality, suffering begins to lose its power. This does not mean reality will always make you happy. Sometimes reality breaks your heart. Sometimes it forces you to accept that someone you deeply loved is not capable of giving you the peace you hoped for. Sometimes it asks you to release dreams you spent years building. These moments are painful, but pain accepted with wisdom becomes a doorway to freedom. Pain resisted through attachment becomes prolonged suffering. There is a quiet strength that appears when you stop asking reality to become different. Instead of saying, "Why are they like this?" you begin asking, "How should I respond wisely to what is already true?" This question changes everything, because now your attention moves away from controlling another person and returns to cultivating your own awareness. That is where freedom begins. You no longer spend every day trying to rewrite another person's character. You stop trying to earn love from someone who keeps withholding it. You stop chasing apologies that never come. You stop waiting for respect from someone who has repeatedly shown disrespect. Instead, you become honest with yourself. And honesty is one of the greatest forms of compassion. It allows you to see without illusion. It allows you to love without blindness. It allows you to let go without hatred. The Buddha taught that wisdom begins with seeing clearly. Seeing clearly does not always feel comfortable. Sometimes clarity removes the beautiful stories the mind has been telling itself for years. But those stories, no matter how comforting, cannot bring lasting peace if they are built on illusion. Real peace is born from truth. Truth may ask you to release someone you never wanted to lose. Truth may ask you to stop believing promises that have never become actions. Truth may ask you to accept that your kindness alone cannot transform another person's heart. This acceptance is not defeat, it is awakening. The moment you stop chasing the person you imagined and begin accepting the person who truly stands before you, something remarkable happens. The struggle inside your mind begins to quiet. You no longer waste your energy fighting reality. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to turn someone into the version you created in your imagination. You simply see, you simply understand, and from that understanding, wisdom naturally knows what to do next. Sometimes wisdom tells you to stay and continue growing together. Sometimes wisdom tells you to patiently support someone who is sincerely changing. But sometimes wisdom quietly whispers something your attachment never wanted to hear. It whispers, "It is time to let go," not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally stopped loving an illusion. And the moment you release the illusion, you take your first true step toward inner freedom. 4. Your mind is sacred ground. Protect it like a temple. The Buddha taught that everything begins in the mind. Before there is speech, there is thought. Before there is action, there is intention. Before there is suffering, there is a movement within the mind that either clings, resists, or misunderstands reality. This is why Buddhism places such extraordinary importance on caring for the mind. Your greatest responsibility is not simply to take care of your body, your possessions, or your reputation. Your greatest responsibility is to protect the quality of your own consciousness. Many people spend years protecting their money. They protect their homes with locks. They protect their phones with passwords. They protect valuable possessions from being stolen or damaged, but they allow anyone to enter their mind. They allow criticism to live there for weeks. They allow insults to echo there for years. They allow toxic people to occupy their thoughts from morning until night. They allow fear, resentment, guilt, and emotional chaos to settle inside them until those emotions begin to feel normal. Without realizing it, they guard everything except the one thing that matters most. The Buddha described the mind as the source from which our entire experience of life arises. If the mind is disturbed, the world appears disturbed. If the mind is peaceful, the world is experienced differently. This is why protecting your mind is not selfish. It is one of the most important spiritual practices you can develop. Imagine trying to grow a beautiful lotus flower in polluted water. No matter how much sunlight it receives, the unhealthy environment makes healthy growth much more difficult. Your mind works the same way. If every day you expose yourself to manipulation, constant criticism, emotional games, anger, dishonesty, and negativity, you should not be surprised when your own inner peace begins to disappear. Many people blame themselves for losing their calm. They wonder why meditation has become difficult, why they cannot concentrate, why their thoughts race endlessly, why they feel anxious even during quiet moments. Sometimes the problem is not that they have forgotten how to meditate. The problem is that they continue allowing their inner world to be polluted by people who never respect their peace. The Buddha repeatedly encouraged his disciples to become aware of the conditions that shape the mind. Every conversation influences you. Every environment leaves an impression. Every relationship either strengthens mindfulness or weakens it. The people you spend the most time with slowly shape the quality of your thinking. If you constantly surround yourself with people who gossip, complain, manipulate, criticize, and create conflict, your own mind begins carrying those same patterns. Even if you do not speak the words yourself, you begin carrying their emotional weight. This is why wise practitioners choose their company carefully, not because they believe they are better than others, but because they understand that the mind quietly absorbs everything it repeatedly encounters. Think about a peaceful lake. When the water is still, you can clearly see your reflection. You can see the sky. You can see the mountains. Everything becomes clear. Now imagine throwing stones into that lake every few seconds. The water never has a chance to settle. The reflection disappears. Clarity disappears. Only disturbance remains. Many people live exactly like that. Every day someone throws another emotional stone into their mind, a cruel comment, another lie, another argument, another disappointment, another broken promise, another manipulation. The mind never has time to become still, and then they wonder why they cannot hear their own inner wisdom. Wisdom speaks softly, but emotional chaos is loud. When the mind is constantly disturbed, it becomes difficult to recognize the quiet voice of awareness that the Buddha encouraged us to cultivate. This is why protecting your peace is not about escaping life. It is about creating the conditions in which wisdom can grow. The Buddha often sought quiet places for meditation, forests, mountains, peaceful surroundings. He understood that external conditions influence the mind, especially while we are still learning. Today, many people willingly remain inside emotional environments that are far more destructive than any noisy city. They wake up worrying about one person. They spend the day trying to predict another person's moods. They go to sleep replaying painful conversations. Even when that person is physically absent, they continue living inside the mind. This is not freedom. This is mental captivity. One of the greatest acts of mindfulness is recognizing who is repeatedly disturbing your inner stillness. Ask yourself honestly, who occupies your thoughts the most? Who makes your body tense before you even receive a message from them? Whose name immediately changes your emotional state? Who repeatedly steals your attention away from the present moment? The answer to these questions reveals where your energy is flowing. The Buddha taught that attention is precious. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is constantly trapped inside unhealthy relationships, then your opportunity for inner growth becomes much smaller. Many people believe boundaries are signs of anger. In reality, healthy boundaries are signs of awareness. A boundary simply recognizes where peace begins to disappear. It quietly says, "This behavior is not healthy for my mind." It says, "I refuse to allow repeated disrespect to become normal." It says, "I can care about you without giving you unlimited access to my peace." Notice that none of these statements contain hatred. They simply contain clarity. Clarity is one of the greatest expressions of wisdom. Without clarity, compassion becomes exhaustion. Without clarity, forgiveness becomes repeated self-harm. Without clarity, kindness becomes permission for others to continue harmful behavior. The Buddha never encouraged unconscious sacrifice. He encouraged conscious living. Sometimes conscious living requires saying no. Sometimes it requires walking away. Sometimes it requires silence instead of another argument. Sometimes it requires accepting that protecting your peace is more important than winning another disagreement. This can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you have spent your entire life trying to keep everyone happy. You may feel guilty. You may worry that people will misunderstand you. You may fear being called selfish. But remember this: choosing peace is not rejecting other people. It is refusing to reject yourself. There is a profound difference. Every moment you protect your mind from unnecessary suffering, you strengthen your ability to practice mindfulness. Every moment you refuse to participate in unnecessary conflict, you create more space for wisdom. Every moment you release emotional chaos, compassion naturally becomes easier, because compassion grows best inside a peaceful mind. Imagine a monk tending a small temple. Every morning he sweeps away dust. He removes fallen leaves. He keeps the space clean and quiet, not because he is obsessed with perfection, but because he understands that a sacred place deserves careful attention. Your mind deserves that same care. Every day you have the opportunity to sweep away resentment before it settles, to remove unnecessary anger before it becomes permanent, to release painful thoughts before they become your identity, to gently close the door to people who repeatedly bring darkness into a place that should be filled with light. Your mind is not an empty room where anyone should leave their emotional baggage. It is sacred ground. It is where awareness awakens. It is where compassion is cultivated, It is where wisdom grows, and sacred ground must be protected, not through fear, not through isolation, not through hatred, but through mindful choices made every single day. The Buddha never promised a world without difficult people. He promised that freedom was possible despite them. That freedom begins the moment you stop giving every person permission to live inside your mind, because the greatest temple you will ever care for is not made of stone. It is your own consciousness. Protect it with wisdom, guard it with mindfulness, nourish it with compassion, and never allow anyone, no matter how important they seem, to repeatedly destroy the peace that the Buddha taught you to cultivate from within. 5. Letting go is not losing. It is returning to yourself. One of the greatest fears the human mind carries is the fear of letting go. We convince ourselves that if we release someone, we are losing a part of our life. We imagine that walking away means failure. We believe that ending an unhealthy attachment means admitting defeat. Because of this fear, many people continue carrying relationships that have already ended in their hearts, even though they still exist in their daily lives. The Buddha understood this fear deeply. He knew that the mind naturally clings to what feels familiar, even when that familiarity creates suffering. The strange thing about attachment is that it often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. Many people would rather remain in a relationship that constantly hurts them than face the uncertainty of being alone. Not because the relationship makes them happy, but because the unknown feels frightening. The mind begins asking endless questions. What if I never find someone else? What if they change after I leave? What if I regret this decision? What if I am making a mistake? What if being alone is even more painful? These thoughts appear one after another, creating the illusion that staying is safer than leaving. But the Buddha encouraged us to observe fear instead of obeying it. Fear is a feeling. It is not always the truth. Just because the mind imagines a painful future does not mean that future will happen. Very often, attachment speaks in the language of fear because it knows that once fear disappears, it loses its control over you. When you begin letting go, attachment will fight to survive. It will remind you of every beautiful memory. It will make you forget the sleepless nights. It will replay the moments of laughter while hiding the years of disappointment. It will whisper, maybe this time will be different. It will encourage you to ignore the countless times your peace was broken. This is why mindfulness is so important. Mindfulness allows you to remember the whole truth instead of only the parts your attachment wants you to remember. A peaceful mind does not deny the beautiful moments, but it also refuses to forget the painful patterns. Both are part of reality. Many people spend years trying to save a relationship while slowly losing themselves. At first, the changes are almost invisible. They stop doing the activities they once enjoyed. They stop spending time with supportive friends. They stop pursuing personal growth. They stop laughing as often. They stop sleeping peacefully. They stop trusting themselves. Little by little, they become strangers to the person they used to be. Then one day they ask themselves a heartbreaking question. When did I stop feeling like myself? This is one of the hidden costs of unhealthy attachment. You become so focused on holding on to another person that you quietly let go of yourself. The Buddha's teachings point in the opposite direction. The path is always one of returning to awareness, returning to mindfulness, returning to simplicity, returning to the present moment, returning to the peaceful nature that has always existed beneath fear and craving. When you finally choose to let go of someone who continually destroys your peace, something remarkable begins to happen. At first, there is silence. That silence may feel uncomfortable. You have become so accustomed to emotional chaos that calmness almost feels unfamiliar. The phone is quiet. There are no arguments to replay, no emotional games to solve, no endless explanations to prepare. For a while, your mind may mistake peace for emptiness. Do not be afraid of this stage. It is simply your nervous system learning what safety feels like again. Many people mistake the absence of drama for the absence of love, but these are not the same thing. Drama creates intensity. Peace creates stability. Attachment often confuses intensity with love, because intensity keeps the emotions constantly activated. But the Buddha never taught that awakening feels dramatic. He taught that awakening feels clear, still, balanced, free. As time passes, you begin noticing small changes. Your breathing becomes deeper. You wake up without immediately worrying about someone else's mood. You begin enjoying simple moments again. A cup of tea, the sound of birds, a quiet morning, a walk without constantly checking your phone. You discover something surprising. The peace you were desperately searching for in another person had quietly been waiting inside you all along. It was simply buried beneath layers of attachment. This is why letting go is not becoming empty. It is removing what was covering your natural peace. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day for many years. After a while, you no longer notice the weight. It becomes normal. Your shoulders ache, your back hurts, your steps become slower. But because you have carried it for so long, you assume that this is simply what life feels like. Then one day you finally put the backpack down. At first, your body feels strange, almost too light. You may even instinctively reach for the weight again because it has become familiar. Then slowly you realize how freely you can move, how deeply you can breathe, how much energy you actually have. Attachment works in exactly the same way. It convinces you that emotional heaviness is normal. It convinces you that constant anxiety is part of love. It convinces you that worrying every day is simply the price of caring. The Buddha gently invites us to question these beliefs. Is suffering really proof of love? Or is suffering simply proof that attachment has become stronger than wisdom? This question changes everything. Because once you stop glorifying suffering, you begin valuing peace. You stop measuring relationships by how intense they feel. Instead, you begin measuring them by how much wisdom, kindness, and stability they bring into your life. You realize that true companionship should help your mind become lighter, not heavier. It should encourage mindfulness, not constant confusion. It should deepen compassion, not endless emotional exhaustion. There is another beautiful truth hidden inside letting go. When your hands are tightly closed around something that keeps hurting you, they cannot receive anything new. The Buddha often reminded us that attachment prevents us from experiencing the present moment. When your entire attention remains trapped in the past, you cannot fully see the opportunities that exist today. Perhaps there are peaceful friendships waiting for you. Perhaps there are moments of joy you have been too distracted to notice. Perhaps there is wisdom you have been unable to hear because your mind has been filled with emotional noise. Perhaps there is a deeper relationship with yourself that has been waiting patiently beneath years of attachment. But none of these gifts can be fully received while your hands remain tightly closed. Sometimes life asks you to release something not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants to return you to yourself. This is one of the most compassionate truths in Buddhism. Nothing that truly belongs to your path can be taken away by letting go of what was never meant to remain. The Buddha did not teach people to abandon love. He taught them to abandon clinging. These are very different things. You can continue loving someone while accepting that they are no longer healthy for your journey. You can appreciate the lessons they brought into your life while no longer allowing them to disturb your peace. You can thank them silently for what they taught you and continue walking forward without anger. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. One day you may look back and realize something you could not see while you were still attached. You did not lose yourself the day you let them go. You found yourself. You found the version of yourself that could finally breathe without fear. You found the version of yourself that no longer depended on another person's approval to feel complete. You found the quiet joy that had been buried beneath years of emotional struggle. And in that moment, you understand one of the Buddha's deepest teachings. Freedom is not found by holding on more tightly. Freedom is found the moment you stop clinging to what has been pulling you away from your own inner peace. Because every step away from unhealthy attachment is also a step back toward your true nature. And your true nature has always been peaceful. It has simply been waiting for you to come home. 6. Forgive them, but do not walk back into the fire. One of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism is forgiveness. Many people believe that forgiveness means pretending nothing happened, They believe it means forgetting every wound. They believe it means welcoming harmful people back into their lives over and over again, no matter how many times they have been hurt. Because of this misunderstanding, countless people remain trapped in cycles of suffering. Every time they are betrayed, they forgive. Every time they are disrespected, they forgive. Every time they are manipulated, they forgive. But after forgiving, they return to exactly the same situation, expecting a different outcome. Eventually, they begin wondering why their suffering never ends. The Buddha's teachings invite us to look at forgiveness with much greater wisdom. Forgiveness is not permission. Forgiveness is not surrender. Forgiveness is not pretending that harmful actions are acceptable. Forgiveness is something much deeper. It is the decision to stop carrying hatred inside your own heart. Hatred harms the person carrying it far more than the person it is directed toward. Imagine carrying a burning piece of charcoal in your hand because you are waiting for the perfect moment to throw it at someone else. Long before you ever throw it, your own hand has already been burned. Resentment works in exactly the same way. Every day you replay the betrayal. Every day you repeat the argument inside your mind. Every day you imagine different conversations. Every day you hope they will finally understand how much they hurt you. Meanwhile, your own mind continues suffering. The Buddha understood that hatred never truly frees us. Hatred only creates more suffering. This is why forgiveness is important, not because the other person deserves it, but because your own heart deserves peace. Forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It releases the heavy burden of anger that has been living inside your mind. It allows you to breathe without carrying yesterday into every new morning. It allows your meditation to become lighter. It allows your thoughts to become quieter. It allows compassion to return naturally instead of being blocked by bitterness. But forgiveness does not ask you to abandon wisdom. In fact, real forgiveness requires wisdom. Without wisdom, forgiveness becomes another form of attachment. Many people repeatedly say, "I forgive them," when what they actually mean is, "I am afraid to let them go." These are not the same thing. Sometimes people use forgiveness as an excuse to avoid making difficult decisions. They tell themselves, "A good Buddhist should always give another chance." Then they give another chance, and another, until years have passed and nothing has changed except the amount of suffering they have accumulated. The Buddha never encouraged people to ignore reality. He encouraged people to understand it clearly. If someone repeatedly demonstrates the same harmful behavior, wisdom asks you to learn from what you have observed. Mindfulness means paying attention. It means recognizing patterns instead of becoming trapped inside false hope. If someone burns your hand once, you naturally become more careful. If they burn it again, wisdom encourages you to stop placing your hand into the same fire. Imagine standing before a fire. The fire is beautiful. It gives warmth. It provides light. But if you continue placing your hand directly into the flames, you will be burned every single time. You would never blame the fire for behaving like fire. You would simply understand its nature. Some people are like that fire, not because they are evil, not because they are beyond compassion, but because they have not yet transformed their own minds. They continue acting from anger, from greed, from ignorance, from insecurity, from fear, from habits they have never questioned. You can understand this. You can even feel compassion for their suffering. But compassion does not require you to keep placing yourself where you will certainly be burned. There is an important difference between loving someone and trusting someone. Love may continue. Trust must be earned. Trust grows slowly through consistent actions. It cannot be rebuilt through beautiful words alone. Many people mistake apologies for transformation. An apology is only the beginning. Transformation is demonstrated through repeated actions over time. The Buddha always encouraged observation. Do not simply listen. Observe. Do not simply believe promises. Observe behavior. Behavior reveals the true condition of the mind. Anyone can promise to change during moments of regret. Only sustained mindful action demonstrates real transformation. Sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is quietly accepting that someone is not ready to change. This acceptance hurts, especially when you love them deeply, especially when you remember the good moments, especially when you still wish things could be different. But acceptance is not giving up. Acceptance is refusing to argue with reality. Many people exhaust themselves trying to force another person's awakening. They explain, they beg, they cry, they sacrifice, they forgive endlessly, yet nothing changes, not because they did not love enough, but because awakening cannot be borrowed from another person. Every individual must choose it for themselves. Even the Buddha could not force enlightenment upon those who resisted wisdom. He offered the path. Each person decided whether to walk it. The same truth applies to your own life. You may point toward peace. You may demonstrate kindness. You may live with integrity. But you cannot force another human being to value those qualities. Recognizing this truth frees an enormous amount of emotional energy. Instead of spending years trying to change someone else's heart, you begin cultivating your own. Instead of chasing their transformation, you deepen your own mindfulness. Instead of waiting for them to become peaceful, you become peaceful yourself. This is where the real journey begins. There is another misunderstanding that keeps many people trapped. They believe that creating distance means they have failed spiritually. They fear that saying no is unkind. They fear that leaving is selfish. But sometimes distance is the most compassionate response available. Distance prevents more arguments. Distance prevents deeper resentment. Distance gives both people space to reflect. Distance protects the mind from further unnecessary suffering. Distance allows healing to begin. The Buddha often withdrew into solitude, not because he hated humanity, but because silence nourished wisdom. Sometimes stepping away from harmful relationships serves the same purpose. It creates the silence needed for clarity to return. Without constant emotional noise, you begin hearing your own inner wisdom again. You begin recognizing how much of your life had been consumed by emotional survival. You begin noticing how peaceful, ordinary moments actually are. A sunrise, a quiet cup of tea, a slow walk beneath trees, the sound of rain, the rhythm of your own breathing. These simple experiences had always been available. Attachment simply prevented you from noticing them. One of the most beautiful qualities of forgiveness is that it asks for nothing in return. You do not forgive because someone apologized perfectly. You do not forgive because they admitted every mistake. You do not forgive because they finally became the person you wanted them to be. You forgive because you no longer want your own heart to remain imprisoned. That freedom belongs to you. No one else can give it. No one else can take it away. But remember this carefully. Forgiveness is an internal release. Reconciliation is a separate choice. These two things are not identical. You may forgive someone completely while recognizing that rebuilding a relationship would not be wise. You may wish them happiness while choosing never to invite them back into your daily life. You may sincerely hope they awaken while understanding that your own journey must continue without them. This is not contradiction. This is maturity. The Buddha's path has never been about choosing between love and wisdom. It has always been about allowing wisdom to guide love. When wisdom guides love, compassion becomes healthy. When wisdom guides forgiveness, peace becomes lasting. When wisdom guides your decisions, you stop confusing endless suffering with spiritual growth. You realize that your purpose is not to prove how much pain you can endure. Your purpose is to awaken, to become more mindful, more compassionate, more peaceful. And sometimes awakening requires one of the most difficult acts of courage: to forgive someone completely while refusing to walk back into the very fire from which you finally escaped. Because once you truly understand the Buddha's teachings, you recognize a profound truth. Forgiveness opens the prison door inside your own heart. Wisdom makes sure you never willingly lock yourself inside that prison again. That is the balance of the middle way: a heart free from hatred, a mind guided by clarity, and a life that no longer mistakes repeated suffering for compassion. That is the freedom the Buddha invited every one of us to discover. 7. Choose peace before your mind breaks. There is a point where patience stops being wisdom and becomes self-abandonment. There is a point where forgiveness stops being freedom and becomes a doorway back into suffering. There is a point where loyalty stops being love and becomes fear wearing a noble name. Many people do not recognize this point until they are already exhausted. They wait until their sleep is broken. They wait until their body is tense every day. They wait until their joy has disappeared. They wait until their mind is constantly replaying arguments, insults, disappointments, betrayals, and unfinished conversations. They wait until they no longer feel like themselves. Then they finally ask, how did I become this person? The answer is painful but simple. You kept choosing someone else's comfort over your own peace. You kept protecting a relationship while abandoning your own mind. You kept calling it compassion when, in truth, you were ignoring the suffering inside yourself. The Buddha did not teach us to wait until the mind is destroyed before we become aware. He taught awareness now, not after years of damage, not after your heart becomes bitter, not after your body begins carrying the stress. Now, this is why you must learn to choose peace before your mind breaks. Many people treat inner peace as something optional. They think peace is a luxury, something they will focus on later, after everyone else is satisfied, after the conflict ends, after the other person finally understands, after life becomes easier. But peace is not a luxury. Peace is the ground of a mindful life. Without peace, your judgment becomes cloudy, your speech becomes reactive, your emotions become unstable, your body becomes tired, your spiritual practice becomes weak. Even your compassion becomes mixed with resentment because you are giving from an empty place. A disturbed mind cannot see clearly, and the Buddha's path begins with seeing clearly. If someone's presence constantly makes your mind heavy, you cannot ignore that and pretend it is spiritual maturity. That is not maturity, that is denial. Buddhism is not about pretending suffering is not happening. Buddhism begins by recognizing suffering honestly. The first noble truth is not hide your suffering. It is not decorate your suffering. It is not romanticize your suffering. It is the direct recognition that suffering exists. So if a person, a relationship, or an attachment is repeatedly producing suffering in your life, you must have the courage to name it clearly, not with hatred, not with blame, not with drama, just clarity. This is hurting me. This is disturbing my mind. This is no longer healthy. This attachment is pulling me away from peace. That kind of honesty is not weakness. It is the beginning of liberation. Many people are afraid of choosing peace because choosing peace often requires disappointing someone else. You may have to stop answering every message. You may have to stop explaining yourself to someone who keeps misunderstanding you on purpose. You may have to stop attending every argument you are invited into. You may have to stop giving access to a person who keeps proving they cannot handle your kindness with respect. And when you do this, they may accuse you of changing. They may say you became cold. They may say you abandoned them. They may say you are selfish. But listen carefully. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will often complain when you finally develop them. This is not proof that you are wrong. It is proof that the old pattern is being interrupted. A person who was comfortable disturbing your peace may not celebrate the moment you protect it. Why would they? Your silence no longer feeds their control. Your distance no longer feeds their drama. Your clarity no longer allows them to confuse you. So do not expect everyone to understand your peace. Some people only understood your availability. Some people only valued your patience because it allowed them to continue acting without consequences. Some people only called you kind because you never said no. But the Buddhist path is not about being liked by everyone. It is about becoming free from the inner chains that keep you trapped in suffering. Choosing peace does not mean you hate anyone. It means you finally understand that hatred is not the only reason to leave. You can leave because the relationship is unhealthy. You can leave because your mind needs rest. You can leave because the same pattern has repeated too many times. You can leave because staying keeps turning you into someone you no longer recognize. You can leave with compassion. You can leave with silence. You can leave with dignity. You can leave without wishing harm upon anyone. This is very important because many people think they need anger in order to walk away. They wait until they are furious enough, broken enough, or disgusted enough to finally choose themselves. But wisdom does not need hatred to move. Wisdom can step away calmly. Wisdom can say, I understand, but I will not continue. Wisdom can say, may you be well, but not at the cost of my peace. Wisdom can say, I release you, not because you are my enemy, but because clinging to you is destroying me. That is not cruelty, that is awakening. The Buddha taught impermanence. Everything changes, relationships change, people change, feelings change. What once felt safe can become harmful. What once brought joy can become a source of pain. What once looked like love can become attachment. What once felt like loyalty can become fear of letting go. A wise person does not cling to something merely because it once had meaning. A flower may be beautiful when it blooms, but when it fades, you do not scream at it to become fresh again. You do not force dead petals back onto the stem. You understand the nature of things. You bow to what was beautiful, and you allow it to pass. Relationships also have seasons. Some people are spring in your life for a time. They bring warmth, growth, and color. But then the season changes. The same person may begin bringing winter into your heart. Coldness, distance, pain, confusion. The mistake is not that the season changed. The mistake is refusing to accept that it changed. This refusal becomes suffering. When you cling to a relationship after its peaceful season has ended, you begin fighting impermanence itself. And no one wins a fight against impermanence. The Buddha's teaching is not to become sad about this, it is to become wise, to understand that everything borrowed from life must one day change form, to understand that clinging cannot stop change, to understand that peace comes not from forcing things to remain, but from learning how to release them when their time has passed. This is why choosing peace requires courage. Because sometimes you are not letting go of a person only, you are letting go of a dream. You are letting go of the future you imagined. You are letting go of the version of them you kept hoping would appear. You are letting go of the belief that your suffering would eventually be rewarded. That is hard. No honest spiritual teacher should pretend it is easy. Letting go can hurt. You may cry. You may miss them. You may remember the good moments. You may question yourself. You may feel loneliness. But pain is not always a sign that you made the wrong choice. Sometimes pain is the sound of attachment leaving the body. Sometimes grief is simply the heart adjusting to freedom. Sometimes the mind panics because it is no longer living in the familiar cage. Do not mistake withdrawal from attachment for proof that you should return. When a person leaves a toxic pattern, the mind often reaches back toward what is familiar. This does not mean the pattern was healthy. It means the pattern was repeated long enough to feel normal. This is why you must be patient with yourself. Choosing peace is not one single decision. It is a practice. You choose peace when you do not respond to the message that was sent only to provoke you. You choose peace when you stop checking whether they noticed your absence. You choose peace when you refuse to replay the same painful story for the 100th time. You choose peace when you return to your breath instead of returning to the wound. You choose peace when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You choose peace when you stop confusing guilt with guidance. You choose peace when you remember that your mind is sacred ground. Every day the old attachment may try to pull you back. It may use memory. It may use fear. It may use loneliness. It may use guilt. But each time you return to awareness, the attachment becomes weaker. Each time you refuse to feed the old pattern, the chain becomes thinner. Each time you sit with the discomfort instead of running back to what hurt you, your inner freedom becomes stronger. This is how liberation happens, not through one dramatic moment, but through many small acts of awareness. The Buddha taught that the mind can be trained. A mind trained in attachment will cling. A mind trained in fear will chase. A mind trained in craving will suffer. But a mind trained in mindfulness will observe. A mind trained in wisdom will release. A mind trained in compassion will forgive without returning to harm. This training is your responsibility. No one else can do it for you. You cannot wait for the person who hurt you to give you permission to heal. You cannot wait for them to admit everything. You cannot wait for the perfect apology. You cannot wait for closure from someone who benefits from keeping you emotionally open. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is a decision. Sometimes closure is the moment you say, I have seen enough. Sometimes closure is accepting that another person may never understand your pain and deciding that your peace no longer depends on their understanding. This is hard, but it is powerful, because the moment your peace no longer depends on their apology, their approval, their explanation, or their change, they no longer control your mind. That is freedom. Many people say they want peace, but they keep feeding the things that destroy peace. They say they want healing, but they keep reopening the wound. They say they want to move forward, but they keep looking back at the door that only led them into suffering. Be honest. If you keep drinking poison, do not call it destiny. If you keep walking into fire, do not call it loyalty. If you keep giving your mind to someone who keeps breaking it, do not call it love. The Buddha's path requires honesty, brutal, compassionate honesty, not the kind of honesty that attacks others, but the kind that stops lying to yourself. You must stop saying, I am fine, when your mind is exhausted. You must stop saying, it is not that bad, when your peace has been disappearing for years. You must stop saying, they will change, when their actions have already shown you the pattern clearly. You must stop saying, I cannot live without them, when the truth is that living with this attachment has already been slowly destroying you. You can live without them, but you cannot live peacefully while abandoning yourself. That is the truth. A person who truly belongs in your life will not require you to lose your mind in order to keep them. A healthy connection will not make you beg for basic respect. A peaceful relationship will not turn your nervous system into a battlefield. A loving presence will not make you feel constantly unsafe, unwanted, or unseen. Do not lower your understanding of love just because you became attached to someone who could not give it properly. Love should not require the death of your inner peace. Love should not make you spiritually smaller. Love should not pull you away from mindfulness, dignity, and self-respect. If it does, then you are not being asked to love more. You are being asked to wake up. And waking up often begins with one quiet decision. I will not let this destroy me anymore. Say it inwardly, not as anger, not as revenge, not as pride. Say it as truth. I will not let this destroy me anymore. This sentence can become a doorway back to your breath, a doorway back to your body, a doorway back to your clarity, a doorway back to the path, because the path is still there, even after all the pain, even after all the confusion, even after all the years you spent holding on. The path has not disappeared. Your peace has not died. Your wisdom has not left you. It has simply been covered by attachment, fear, and emotional exhaustion. When you begin choosing peace, layer by layer, you uncover what was always present. You begin to feel your own life again. You begin to notice silence without fearing it. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your own judgment. You begin to breathe without waiting for someone else to decide your emotional state. This is the return. This is the healing. This is the freedom that comes when you stop handing your mind to those who do not know how to treat it with care. So choose peace before your mind breaks, not after. Not when you have nothing left, not when bitterness has hardened your heart, not when suffering has become your identity. Choose peace while there is still softness in you. Choose peace while your heart can still open without fear. Choose peace while your mind can still remember what calm feels like. Let them go before they destroy your mind. Let them go before their chaos becomes your personality. Let them go before their disrespect becomes your self-image. Let them go before their absence feels less painful than their presence. Let them go with compassion. Let them go with wisdom. Let them go with gratitude for the lesson, but without clinging to the wound. And as you let go, remember this: you are not choosing loneliness. You are choosing liberation. You are not choosing emptiness. You are choosing space. You are not choosing hatred. You are choosing peace. And peace, once truly chosen, becomes the beginning of a life that no longer belongs to suffering. As we come to the end of these teachings, I want to leave you with one final reflection. The Buddha never promised a life without difficult people. He never said that everyone you love would understand you. He never said that kindness would always be returned with kindness. He never said that your heart would never be broken. What he did promise was something far greater. He showed that no matter what happens around you, freedom is possible. Not because the world suddenly becomes peaceful, but because your mind no longer depends on the world to remain at peace. That is the real journey. Many people spend their entire lives trying to change others. They try to convince, they try to fix, they try to rescue, they try to earn love. They try to hold on to people who have already let go in their hearts. And in doing so, they slowly lose the most precious thing they have: their own inner peace. Do not make that mistake. Your peace is not something to bargain with. It is not something to sacrifice just to keep another person comfortable. It is the foundation of your spiritual life. Protect it, nurture it, return to it every single day. Remember, letting go is not an act of hatred. It is an act of wisdom. It does not mean you stop wishing others well. It means you stop allowing their ignorance to become your suffering. You can still have compassion. You can still forgive. You can still pray that they find peace. But you no longer need to walk beside someone who continually leads you away from your own. Every step you take toward peace is a step toward awakening. Every attachment you release makes your heart a little lighter. Every illusion you let go of allows you to see reality more clearly. Every moment you choose mindfulness instead of fear, wisdom instead of attachment, and compassion instead of resentment, you are walking the path the Buddha pointed toward more than 2,500 years ago. So if there is someone in your life whose presence keeps stealing your peace, whose words keep disturbing your mind, or whose behavior keeps pulling you away from the calmness you have worked so hard to cultivate, have the courage to ask yourself one simple question: does holding on bring me closer to awakening, or is it keeping me trapped in suffering? Be completely honest with yourself. That answer may change your life. The greatest gift you can offer this world is not a mind filled with fear, resentment, and exhaustion. It is a mind that has learned to be peaceful, a heart that has learned to be compassionate without becoming attached, a life that reflects wisdom instead of craving. May you find the courage to release what no longer serves your awakening. May you find the wisdom to recognize the difference between love and attachment. May you find the strength to walk away from what repeatedly harms your spirit without carrying hatred in your heart. And above all, may you discover the peace that has never been outside you. It has always been within you, patiently waiting beneath every fear, every attachment, and every illusion. Thank you for spending this time on the path with me. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. May your heart be light. And may your journey always lead you back to the quiet freedom that the Buddha called the end of suffering.